So Parliament is looking to finalise the Electoral Amendment Bill by the end of February next year, but that's if the Constitutional Court grants it an extension. The National Assembly says it will not be possible to pass the document by the 10th of December deadline, and that a second extension would allow for public participation. The bill seeks to allow independent candidates to contest local and general elections. For more on this, let's bring in CASAC's Executive Director, Lawson Naidoo, live to us via our video link this morning. Lawson, great to have you on the program as always. Thanks for making time. So much being said about this catch-22, right? So on the one hand, we do need some way to allow independent candidates to contest meaningfully come 2024. But on the other hand, Parliament's saying we're simply not ready to roll that out given just how expansive some of these changes need to be. So as a start, let's get your take on whether or not you reckon this request for another extension is justifiable.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me on. Look, I think, the issue that really is at the forefront here is the ill-thought-out legislation or draft bill that is currently before Parliament. It requires constant looking at and changes being made along the way. Therefore, Parliament has once again now gone to the Constitutional Court at the very last minute to get a further extension, having already been given a 6-month extension earlier this year, because they now say that they have to go out for further public consultations on aspects of the bill that were amended by the NCOP. Now, civil society organizations have been calling on Parliament to engage in a proper public participation exercise, and they failed to do that. They're doing it now in a piecemeal way, it casts doubt on the, on this bill as a whole, whether it really meets the needs of South Africa and whether it really caters to the judgment of the Constitutional Court that requires an electoral system that accommodates independent candidates. However, the court is going to find itself in a very difficult situation because if it refuses to grant the extension, we simply then do not have an electoral system that we can use for the elections in 2024.
Well, is that the possible scenario? I mean, if it refuses to grant the extension, do we not revert to how elections have always been held in the past?
No, well, it's not as simple as that, unfortunately, Ayanda, because the Constitutional Court has already, in its judgment in the New Nation Movement case, said very categorically that the existing electoral system is unconstitutional.
Right.
And we cannot use a system that has been deemed to be unconstitutional to conduct elections. The outcome of that would be challenged. And therefore, Parliament has wasted 2.5 years now when it could have been putting together a proper piece of legislation. It's a wasted time, and we find ourselves in this, in this almost in a crisis once again.
Fair enough. Let's unpack the scenario if this extension is granted. Essentially, what Parliament is saying is, we need more time in order to have this public participation process to continue. And I suppose what happens in the meantime is the question. I mean, if 2024 comes whilst this extension is granted, do we then go with this amendment bill while it's being discussed in Parliament? I don't see that as an option.
Well, that's not an option. So the list has got to be finalised, and it's got to be finalised soon because we need to give the Electoral Commission sufficient time to prepare for elections on the basis of this new electoral system. The IEC has said in the past that they need 18 months to do that. And if this bill is only passed at the end of February next year, that would leave what the IEC would before the 2024 elections need to take place. So the IEC is once again going to come under pressure. And we cannot have an election unless Parliament has passed a piece of legislation, it's been signed and promulgated by the President, and is fully in force. And so the time pressures are huge here.
Yeah.
And, we really hope that Parliament will pay heed to the submissions that it receives now and put in place a piece of legislation on which we can hold free and fair and credible elections in 2024.
Right. I wonder what you make of the reasons for why Parliament is asking for this extension to begin with. I mean, they speak about a panel, for instance, that needs to be constituted or a clause that must be created so that a panel can be put together to look at more extensive changes to the bill itself. I think the second reason has to do with the number of signatures that independent candidates will need in order to contest in a fair and meaningful way against political parties come 2024. Do those reasons hold water as far as you're concerned?
Well, let's deal with each of them in turn. I think the idea of the panel is a good one, and it's unfortunate that once again Parliament has belatedly recognized that this piece of legislation that they put on the table, which merely tweaks the current system and makes provision for independent candidates to contest elections, but on the basis that a whole province constitutes a constituency, and independent candidates therefore have to compete against political parties within that. The idea of the panel, which is to explore other electoral reform options, is a welcome. Will provide us with an opportunity, I hope, that we can have a more meaningful engagement about the kind of electoral system that South Africa requires, that both enhances accountability and brings our public representatives closer to the electorate, and that we can therefore look forward to elections in 2029 that will be run on a system that has a lot more credibility than the model demonstrated by the second issue, which is about the signatures required to get onto a ballot paper. And the provision in the bill says that it's 20% of the quota that would have secured a seat in the previous election. That could be from 18 to 20,000 signatures, which is for an independent candidate will not have the resources to muster that kind of effort to get those signatures and ID numbers of supporters.